How's it going, everyone? James here from Evo Homes. I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to a new video series which is all about how you can make your first £500,000 profit from property development. Quick introductions. Evo Homes is a property development business with one simple aim, and that is to inspire others through showcasing our projects and providing advice. I'm James, I'm a part-time property developer. I've been involved in around 6 projects over around a 7 to 8 year period. Now that might not sound like a lot, but all of these projects have been done on the side of full-time work. And I'd like to provide advice about how you can potentially achieve something similar. Quick disclaimer, I don't class myself as an expert property developer. I've not been to any dedicated seminars or really read any dedicated books. That's not to say that there's not great information that can be had down that route. I just took the approach, and I'm a firm believer that you can pretty much just jump into this, go through it, and learn as you go. I still am an office worker, but I went from being an office worker who had never picked up a tool to someone who is now confident about how houses are put together, about purchasing houses with a view to turn profit, and happy to roll my sleeves up and grab a tool when it makes sense to. This is going to be a 3-part video series. The first of which is going to be all about our first flip. What's a flip? A flip is when you buy a property, you do some renovation work to it to increase its value, you then sell it and turn a profit from that increase in value. The second video is going to be about our first buy-to-let. What's a buy-to-let? A buy-to-let is when you buy a property, you let it out to someone else, and you generate revenue and profit from the rental income. And the third video is going to be about how you start to scale things up. So how do you pick larger flip projects where you can add more value through extensions and really increasing size? And then how do you start to reinvest money into more buy-to-lets and start to build a portfolio? In each of these videos, I'm going to be breaking down my top tips based on what we've learned from our own experiences, from what went well and what didn't go so well. Yeah, sorry guys, things definitely don't always go to plan in property development. It's very much a test and learn experience. And then I'll also be running through the finances. So what sort of money can you actually expect to make from these projects? So what was our first flip? Our first flip was an 1880s Victorian semi-detached property, which we bought in around 2014 in West Sussex in the southeast of England, which is where we're based. So let's pull that up and look at some pictures to show you what we did. So as you can see, we probably picked the ugliest looking house on the street, but when you're looking for flip projects, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And one of the key things I took from my first project was that you have to be willing to look past things that you'd usually consider negatives when buying a property. For example, it's too dated inside, it's too run down, it needs too much work doing. These can all be seen as positives because A, it means you can get the property for a lower price, and B, once you make it all new and shiny, it's going to be worth quite a lot more. So you're making that big difference in price, which is your profit, which is what your ultimate goal is here. So take this one, for example, having the worst looking house on the street, or what's perceived to be the worst looking house on the street, is actually an opportunity because you can add that value to bring it up to be in line with the other houses on the road. And this house, although it doesn't look great, it was actually on a popular road near to the station, near to the town centre. And once we did the outside, painted it, hopefully you agree it looked a lot better. I will just disclaimer that and say there are limits to this. So I would recommend taking someone who knows a bit about construction or the building industry when you're early on in property development to come round. If a house is particularly run down, it's worth checking those roof rafters for dry rot, making sure there's no kind of major damp issues, cellars, like some key red flags that would make you potentially overlook the property, or of course have a full structural survey or a home buyer survey to make sure that you're aware what you're getting into. The second key bit of advice I want to share, which also came from the buying process of my first project, is don't get too attached. There's always another project that will come along if something falls through. For example, on our first one, we actually had another one that we were dead set on. We thought it was the perfect location, the perfect house. It had already been stripped out, so some of the work had been done. And unfortunately, something we learned is if a house isn't habitable, then mortgage companies are unlikely to lend on it. And that's the situation we had. The sale fell through, felt really gutted and deflated, went home, got on Rightmove, and this house had also had a sale just fall through. And it was one that I was really interested in from before that we missed out on. So I don't know if I believe in everything happens for a reason, but in property development, it feels like it does, because there is always that next deal. So trust the process, don't get too attached, and don't get too disheartened when things fall through. Third top tip is to start low. So this is all about negotiating your purchase price. Now this might be obvious to some people, but I wanted to include it because it's so important that you get off to a good start in your project. And a good start from a profit perspective can be when you get a house for below market value. So I will couple this by saying, make friends with the estate agents. Don't be afraid to ask questions. You can actually get a lot of very useful information from estate agents. With this house, we were able to find out, for example, the sale had fallen through, and maybe some suggestions around the sort of price they might accept. I often, and it depends on the property price, but I often go in 20, 30,000, sometimes 50,000 below the asking price, because they can always say no and you can always negotiate up. This property we got for 15,000 under the asking price, others we've got for 20, others we've got for 25. But if you beat that market price then you're effectively adding that straight to your profit at the end of the job. So really important to negotiate, don't be afraid to do it. This is a key point where you make money. Let's take a quick look now at what renovation work we actually did to this property. We removed 2 walls which enabled us to open plan the kitchen dining space. This also allowed us to flip the stairs, and by flipping the stairs we could create an access route to the 3rd bedroom so that it was no longer off the 2nd bedroom. Other than that, we completely refurbed the property throughout with all new plumbing and electrics. So we didn't do too much to this property. You can see the work there was fairly simple, and that brings me on to the 4th top tip, which is to do the least amount of work for the most amount of gains. And what this is about is it's about firstly really understanding your budget. There's no point planning something that you simply can't afford with the money you've got. And it's also about understanding the house, the road, something called a ceiling price. So if you look at using tools like Rightmove and Zoopla, which are really, really useful tools for property development, you can see things like what other comparable houses on the road have sold for in the past, or what they're on the market for. And from this, you can start to build an idea of what a ceiling price is, like what's kind of the maximum a house on that road is going to sell for. So there's no point like massively overspending, overspeccing a house if it's going to start to really test that ceiling price. So you want to try and really optimize that sale price with kind of the least amount of work. And with a Victorian semi like this, okay, you can go up in the attic with them. Our budget didn't allow us to do that. So what we did is we did really the least amount of work, some structural work, create some nice open plan, light spaces, all new kitchens, bathrooms, replumb, rewire. So as you can see there, we did quite a few updates to the property, and looking back on this, as it was 7 years ago, it does actually look a bit dated now, and I'm thinking, God, I can't believe we went for that. But we had a limited budget, and that brings me on to the fifth top tip, which is to shop around. Shopping around, particularly when you're early on, actually, forget early on, anytime, it's always important to shop around. When you've got tight budgets, it's especially important. Checkatrade is your friend here. We've had examples where we've had quotes for wiring, plumbing, roofing, and so on come in half the price of your highest quote. And something I learned on the first project is some people are already set in their ways. So yeah, I always use this guy for plumbing, I always use this guy for electrics. Don't be like that because you can save, 50% of the cost of these things, which I've seen, and think of that tallying up over a whole job, how much that's going to mean to your profit at the end. So yeah, use Checker Trade. And I'm not saying, use someone who doesn't know what they're doing. You can still find people on Checker Trade with 20, 50, 100 5-star reviews. And they're great at what they do, but they're more competitive. They want the work more, and they come in cheaper than other people. So get those 3 quotes. Checker Trade's great for tradespeople. When it comes to kitchens, there's kitchens online, DIY kitchens, Benchmark, Howdens, Wren. You've got a lot of options to get comparative quotes. Same with bathroom products online. There's so many different vendors. So yeah, have a shop around and save some money. Due to our limited budget, we did a lot of the work for this project ourselves. Everything from stripping out the old, knocking down walls, helping put the steels in, to laying flooring, redecorating, fitting kitchens, and even turning our hand to plumbing due to my business partner's prior experience. And I will say that it was invaluable experience to gain in your first project. It helps protect your budget and obviously do things for as cheap as possible. And it helps you learn about how a house is put together. Taught me about various aspects of construction and set me up nicely for further renovation projects. I will caveat that and say that an important top tip is to know your limits. And what I mean by this is there comes a time where it makes sense to get in the experts. So there's certain things, like I mentioned, that are, I'm not saying they're unskilled, but you can absolutely learn them and turn your hand to it. But when it comes to plumbing, electrics, plastering, I even turn my hand to plastering. I learned pretty quickly I'm not a plasterer, guys. Those things, get the experts in, just shop around and get a good price. And that's what I mean by know your limits. And in hindsight, and as you start to scale up, I'll talk more about this in the 3rd video, there are actually much better ways that you can be spending your time. So rather than being outside doing some real low skilled manual labor like digging holes, you can actually pay someone, a laborer, a fairly reasonable day rate of say between 80 and 100 pounds to do that. And you can much better spend your time. And this becomes more important as you start to scale up as a property developer. You can spend that time looking for new projects, looking for how you're going to finance your next projects, or designing aspects of the work that are going to be particularly important to your profit. So don't be afraid to get stuck in, guys. You can absolutely turn your hand to this stuff. You can do it working weekends, alongside full-time work. And as long as you've got determination and you don't mind spending your weekend times doing this, it's great and you learn a lot. And then we'll talk about how you start to better spend your time as you scale up in later videos. Right, guys, last top tip before we move into looking at the finances. And this top tip is all about the sales process. And I'm calling it know your market. And what I mean by that is there are certain things that I've learned as I've done more and more projects that you kind of know people that want to buy houses are looking for. And the 2 main things on this project I wanted to call out is that this property, you might have seen on the floor plan, it had a downstairs bathroom, so no upstairs bathroom. You had to go walk through the house, through the kitchen to get to the bathroom, and it had no off-road parking. And they're what I learned, 2 quite big red flags for people that are looking to buy properties. And it meant that I'd say that the sale process took, 2 to 3 months for this property, which it's still worth doing. It was still really good profit generating project, which you'll see when we talk about the finances. But these are interesting things to learn, so I wanted to call it out. Think about those things, put yourself in those shoes of the customer, of the buyer. What are those kind of red flags? And try and I guess avoid properties or change properties so that they don't have those things. Let's talk about the finances. So the property was marketed at 250 and we managed to save 15,000 and get it for 235. There were some purchasing fees, conveyancing and stamp duty. We purchased this house with a mortgage. It was our primary residence and it was very much a live-in, do as much of the work as we could due to our very limited budget, which, like I said, was great. We turned our hand to whatever we could and we were able to do the work for a very stripped back 35,000. Like I said before, I learned that sometimes it's important to get the professionals in. Sometimes it's important to pay for cheap labor and better spend your time. But it was a good learning curve, and the total cost came to 273,980. Couple of years later, we sold the property for 380,000. Agent fees to sell the property for 560, and I estimate the borrowing cost, i.e. what did we have to pay in interest for that mortgage, to be around the 10,000 mark. And that left us with a net profit of 91,460, which we took and reinvested into our first buy-to-let. If you're interested in hearing how that went, subscribe, stick around for the second video, and we'll be talking about that. Guys, thank you so much for everyone that's watched this video. It's all new to me, so this is my first ever YouTube video. So any support you can give it, much appreciated. If you want to carry on and watch the next two videos in the series and potentially further videos, then please subscribe, give us a like. Like I said, give us a comment with any feedback, any questions you have. All will be much appreciated. Thank you very much for watching.